I'm Dr. Devra Davis, president of Environmental Health Trust, and I'm here to talk about my new book, Disconnect: The Truth About Cell Phone Radiation, and introduce the global campaign for safer cell phones. This is a campaign that we are starting in 14 countries, ranging from Canada to Australia to Finland and England. And we are embarked on an effort to communicate to health professionals about the real dangers of constant exposure of microwave radiation to the brain. Most people are unaware that cell phones are basically two-way microwave radios. In fact, the term we use to describe cell phone radiation is radio frequency energy. Radios make music, energy is something we all need. The real word for this should be microwave radiation, because the frequency with which cell phones operate is the same frequency that powers your microwave oven. So the campaign for safer cell phones is working with health professionals to communicate with them, pediatricians, family practice, general docs, naturopaths, about what we know about cell phone and its ability for the radiation to get deep into the brain. In addition, we're working with superintendents of schools, principals, school teachers, parents to create awareness on their part about the safer ways to use cell phones. And finally, we're creating poster contests and video contests for kids in schools, some of which you can find on our website at Environmental Health Trust, which will be linked to the Integrative Healthcare Symposium as well. And what these are is ways for children to help us figure out how do we reach them with very simple messages. Don't keep a cell phone on your body. Don't hold it next to the brain. Use a speakerphone, use a headset, and texting is fine so long as you don't have the phone in your pocket all the time. Some of our children have the capacity now to text without looking while the phone's in their pocket. So there are lots of things we have to be aware of. Now, nobody can tell us what the long-term impact on the developing brain will be from growing up in a sea of radio frequency radiation today. We at Environmental Health Trust, working with the physicians and health professionals at Integrative Healthcare, are deeply concerned about this issue. And that's why we're launching the campaign. We don't want to see the situation with cell phones become like the one that we have dealt with tobacco or asbestos or vinyl chloride or hormone replacement therapy. In all of those instances, we only had definitive evidence that allowed us to change policies after we had lots of sick or dead people. For cell phone radiation now, we had 100% of adults using cell phones, and half of all children under the age of 12 have a cell phone today in many modern countries. That means that we are conducting an experiment on ourselves, and we don't have any controls. Here's what we do know about cell phone radiation. It weakens the blood-brain barrier. It increases glucose in the brain, as we saw from studies in the Journal of the American Medical Association published last week, and studies that were published a few years ago also showing that it affects cerebral blood flow. Cell phone radiation affects the brain. We know that. We also know it weakens the blood-brain barrier. It creates a production of free radicals. It creates heat shock proteins. It creates other chemical alterations in repair, and altogether produces a number of biomarkers in the blood that we know are linked to increased risk of cancer, neurodegenerative diseases, memory loss, and other problems. Now, we do not have definitive human evidence for many of these things, but the reason I wrote my book, Disconnect, is I don't think we should wait for definitive evidence when we have enough compelling experimental evidence and growing numbers of clinical case reports, and we do have some epidemiologic evidence, and here's what it is. There have not been many studies on cell phone radiation and brain cancer, but where they have been conducted, wherever people have used cell phones heavily for a decade or more, they have a doubled risk of brain cancer. And those who began to use cell phones heavily as teenagers have 4 to 5 times more brain cancer by the time they reach their late 20s. Equally troubling are studies that have been conducted in Turkey, the United States, Australia, and Greece, in separate laboratories by some of the world's top researchers in andrology, such as Ashok Agarwal at Cleveland Clinic in the United States. Those different studies have shown that if you take samples of sperm from healthy men and split them in half, the samples exposed to cell phone radiation die 3 times faster and have 3 times more markers of damage, for example, damage to the mitochondrial DNA, which would be fueling the performance of sperm. So we know sperm will die naturally, but the fact that cell phone radiation can make it die much faster, I think is deeply troubling. And that's why we're launching the global campaign for safer cell phones, because we don't want this to become like asbestos and tobacco, where we look back and where our children say to us, when they are our age, how could you have done this to us? We know enough to take simple precautions, and the precautions are really simple. Use a speakerphone, use a headset, don't keep your phone on your body, and don't use a phone when the signal is weak, because a weak signal from the tower to the phone means the phone has to pump more energy out, and 50% of the energy that the phone sends out goes into your brain when the phone is held right here. We also know from studies that have been done for the cell phone industry that if you keep a phone in your shirt or pants pocket, you get 4 to 8 times more radiation than is estimated to occur when it's tested next to your brain or body. And if you look at the fine print warnings that can be found with all new smartphones now, they all say, for the BlackBerry Storm, keep it 0.98 inches from the body. The Apple i4 says, warning, if you keep it in your pocket, you can exceed the FCC exposure guidelines. So obviously, the industry is well aware that there's unsafe radiation coming from phones the way most people use them, and there's a disconnect here, hence the title of my book, between what we understand about microwave radiation from cell phones and the way we use them over and over again. Cell phones have revolutionized our lives, much for the better. They improve our ability to respond to emergencies, but they should not be used as though they are absolutely safe, because we have reasons for concern and we've got to be smarter about how we use them today.
So tell us again where people would go who want to participate in this campaign.
They would go to ehtrust.org, environmentalhealthtrust.org, and we are putting up materials. We have an open source toolkit where you can download safety cards to hand out in clinics, where the posters are translated into Spanish at this point, along with basic 10 concepts you need to know about safer cell phone use. Go to our website. That's where you'll find links to the campaign for safer cell phones, which is a global effort, and we need health professionals to work with us in communities. We have the program now underway in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, Missoula, Montana, Burlingame, California, Berkeley, California, San Francisco, California, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Portland, Oregon, Portland, Maine, the state of Maine, the state of Oregon. There's tremendous amount of interest here, and the government of Israel has recently certainly issued a number of advisories about safer cell phone use, because the Israelis depend on radar to defend themselves, and they know what most people don't know, which is cell phone radiation is a type of radar. Why would you want to hold that next to your brain and body for hours? When cell phones were first approved, they were approved based on a very tall guy with a very big head. Most of the users of cell phones are like me or smaller. They don't have big, fat heads, and they don't speak for just 6 minutes like the safety standards were originally set. People use their cell phones now for hours a month. There's no data ever been developed on what that means for children, and very little data on adults, and what data we do have on adults does show this doubled or greater risk in every well-designed study that's been done on cell phone radiation and brain cancer. So please look at our website, environmentalhealthtrust.org, for information on this, and please work with us. We're looking for people who will volunteer as health professionals. We can give you training slides so you can train others. Continuing medical education is available as well, and we're partnering with the Integrative Healthcare Symposium to get this information out, so the clinicians will be able to be the front line of resource for people. Someone comes into your office and they have a headache, or they can't sleep very well, or they're having fertility problems, you have to ask about their cell phone use, because that turns out to be an important determinant of many things in health that we've generally not paid attention to. Thank you. I'm Dr. Devra Davis.